You don't belong in this seat, and you certainly don't belong on my plane." Those were the last words Captain Ricky Sterling shouted before his hand connected with the face of a young woman in seat 1A. The sound was sickening, a crack of skin on skin that silenced the entire first-class cabin. He thought he was disciplining an unruly stowaway brat who refused to move to economy. He thought he was protecting the prestige of his airline. But Captain Sterling didn't know that the girl in the hoodie, wiping blood from her lip, wasn't just a passenger. She was Seraphine Vance, and as of 72 hours ago, she was the owner of the entire airline. This is the story of the most expensive slap in aviation history. The rain battered the fuselage of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a rhythmic drumming that usually soothed nervous flyers. But inside the first-class cabin of Aurora Airways Flight 404, bound from New York's JFK to London Heathrow, the atmosphere was anything but soothing. It was electric with silent judgment. Seraphine Vance adjusted the hood of her oversized charcoal grey sweatshirt. She pulled it lower over her forehead, obscuring her eyes. At 24 years old, Seraphine didn't look like the typical clientele of Aurora's royal class. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, practical bun. Her sneakers were scuffed. To the untrained eye, she looked like a college student who had gotten lost on her way to the back of the bus. But Seraphine wasn't lost. She was working. 3 days ago, in a closed-door meeting that hadn't yet hit the public news cycle, Seraphine's private equity firm, Vance Global, had acquired a majority stake in Aurora Airways. The airline was hemorrhaging money. The service ratings were plummeting. The board was corrupt. Seraphine, known in the business world as the Silent Shark for her aggressive but quiet acquisitions, wanted to know why. She didn't want a sanitized tour from the CEO. She wanted the raw, unfiltered reality of the customer experience. She checked her boarding pass on her phone again. Seat 1A. She had paid full price for the ticket using a pseudonym, Sarah Vincent, to avoid flagging the manifest. As she settled into the hand-stitched Italian leather seat, she noticed the glances. Across the aisle, a man in a bespoke suit, Mr. Archibald, a hedge fund manager she recognized from a charity gala last year, sniffed audibly and snapped his Wall Street Journal open, creating a barrier between him and the riff-raff. Seraphine ignored him. She reached for the pre-flight menu, testing the weight of the paper stock. Cheap, she noted mentally. They switched to lighter paper to cut costs, but kept the ticket prices the same. "Excuse me." The voice was dripping with saccharine sweetness, but the underlying tone was ice-cold. Seraphine looked up. Standing over her was the lead flight attendant, whose gold name tag read, Tiffany. Tiffany was immaculate, blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection, lipstick a shade of red that looked like a warning sign, and a uniform that was tailored to within an inch of its life. "Yes?" Seraphine asked softly. "I believe you're in the wrong seat, sweetie," Tiffany said, her smile not reaching her eyes. She didn't ask to see a ticket. She stated it as a fact. She gestured vaguely toward the curtain, separating first class from business. "Economy and premium economy board through the second door. This is first class?" "I know," Seraphine said, her voice steady. "I'm in seat 1A. Tiffany let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a sound meant to humiliate. She looked around the cabin, soliciting support from the other wealthy passengers. Mr. Archibald lowered his paper and smirked. "Let me see your boarding pass," Tiffany demanded, dropping the sweet act. She held out a manicured hand, snapping her fingers once. Seraphine felt a flash of irritation, but suppressed it. This was data. This was exactly what she needed to see. If they treated a paying customer like this, based on appearance, The rot in the company was deeper than the financials suggested. Seraphine held up her phone, displaying the QR code and the bolded 1A. Tiffany squinted at the screen, her brow furrowing. She clearly expected to see a forged ticket or an economy assignment. When she saw the valid code, her expression didn't soften, it hardened. "This must be a system error," Tiffany declared loudly. "We've been having glitches all week. There is no way the system assigned a standby upgrade to 1A. That seat is reserved for full-fare dignitaries." "I didn't upgrade," Seraphine said, her patience thinning. "I purchased the ticket. Is there a problem?" "The problem," Tiffany hissed, leaning down so her face was inches from Seraphine's, "is that you are disturbing the atmosphere of this cabin. Look at you. You're making the other guests uncomfortable." "I'm sitting quietly," Seraphine countered. "The only one making a scene is you." Tiffany straightened up, her face flushing pink. She wasn't used to being back-talked, especially not by someone who looked like they shopped at a thrift store. She pressed the intercom button on the wall. "Captain Sterling to the cabin. We have a situation." Seraphine sat back, crossing her arms. "Good," she thought. "Let's see how the leadership handles this." The cockpit door opened. Captain Ricky Sterling emerged. He was a man who looked like he was cast in a movie about pilots from the 1970s. Silver hair, broad shoulders, a jawline that could cut glass, and an air of arrogance that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Sterling was a legend at Aurora Airways, a senior Czech airman with 30 years of flying. He was also, according to the dossier Seraphine had read, practically untouchable. "What is it, Tiffany? I have a departure slot in 20 minutes, Sterling barked, adjusting his tie. "We have a squatter, Captain," Tiffany said, pointing a sharp finger at Seraphine. "She claims to have a ticket, but it's obviously a glitch. I asked her to move to her assigned class, and she's being belligerent. She's refusing to follow crew instructions." Sterling turned his gaze toward seat 1A. He didn't see a billionaire. He didn't see a customer. He saw a young black woman in a hoodie, disrupting his schedule. His eyes narrowed with immediate prejudice. "Young lady," Sterling boomed, his voice projecting that command presence pilots are famous for. "Let's go. Grab your bag. Tiffany will find you a seat in the back where you fit in." "I paid $6,000 for this seat," Seraphine said, locking eyes with the captain. She didn't stand up. She didn't flinch. "I have a valid contract of carriage with this airline. Unless you can cite a specific safety violation I have committed, I am not moving." Sterling blinked. He wasn't used to defiance. In his world, he was God. When he spoke, people obeyed. "The violation," Sterling stepped closer, his polished shoes entering her personal space, "is that you are failing to comply with a crew member's instruction. That is a federal offense. Now, I don't have time to call the Port Authority police and have you dragged off, though I will if I have to. Get up." "Check the manifest," Seraphine challenged him. "My name is on the list, Sarah Vincent." Sterling grabbed the tablet from Tiffany's hands. He scrolled aggressively. He saw the name. Sarah Vincent, full fare, platinum status. He paused. For a second, logic tried to intervene. The ticket was valid. But Ricky Sterling was a man of immense pride. He had already committed to the narrative that she didn't belong. To back down now, in front of Tiffany and the wealthy passengers watching with amusement, would be a blow to his ego he couldn't sustain. He convinced himself it was fraud. Credit card theft. It had to be. "Stolen card," Sterling muttered. "It happens all the time. You think you're the first person to try and scam a joyride in first? I know your type." "My type?" Seraphine asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And what type is that, Captain?" "The type that thinks the rules don't apply to them," Sterling sneered. the type that takes what they haven't earned. The irony was so thick, Seraphine almost laughed. She had built $1 billion portfolio from scratch, starting with a small loan and sleeping in her office for 3 years. Sterling had inherited his position through seniority and a union that protected mediocrity. "I'm not moving," Seraphine stated with finality. "Fly the plane, Captain. You're wasting fuel." That was the breaking point. The air inside the cabin seemed to vanish. The ambient noise of the auxiliary power unit hummed in the background, a stark contrast to the violent tension radiating from Captain Sterling. Sterling's face turned a deep shade of crimson. Being told to fly the plane by a girl who looked like she should be serving him coffee was the ultimate insult. He felt his authority crumbling. He felt the eyes of Mr. Archibald and the other first-class passengers boring into his back. He needed to reassert dominance, immediately. He lunged forward, grabbing Seraphine's upper arm. His grip was like iron, his fingers digging into the soft fabric of her hoodie. "Hey!" Seraphine shouted, shock breaking through her composure. "Don't touch me!" "I am the master of this vessel," Sterling roared, his spit flying. "And under maritime and aviation law, I have the right to remove any threat to the safety of this flight. You are removing yourself, or I am throwing you off." He yanked her, hard. Seraphine was fit. She boxed 3 times a week to manage stress, but she was sitting down and belted in. The force of his pull against the seatbelt knocked the wind out of her. She instinctively reached up and shoved his hand away from her arm. "Get your hands off me!" she yelled, her voice finally rising to match the chaos. "Assault!" Tiffany screamed from the aisle, escalating the situation intentionally. "She just assaulted the captain. Did you see that? She hit him." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. Seraphine had merely broken his grip, but Sterling used it. He needed a justification, and Tiffany just handed him one on a silver platter. "That's it," Sterling growled. He didn't reach for her arm this time, whether it was blind rage, the heat of the moment, or a lifetime of unchecked entitlement. Ricky Sterling made the worst mistake of his life. He swung his right hand. Crack! The back of his hand connected with Seraphine's cheekbone with sickening force. It wasn't a light tap. It was a full-force backhand meant to punish. Seraphine's head snapped to the side. Her sunglasses flew off, clattering against the window. The taste of copper filled her mouth instantly as her lip split against her teeth. The cabin went deathly silent. Even Mr. Archibald dropped his newspaper. A gasp echoed from the back of the cabin where the curtains were slightly parted, and economy passengers were craning their necks to see the commotion. Seraphine sat frozen for a heartbeat, her face turned toward the window. Her cheek burned like fire. A single drop of blood trickled down her chin, landing on the grey hoodie. She slowly turned her head back to face him. Captain Sterling was breathing heavily, his chest heaving. For a split second, his eyes widened. He looked at his own hand, then at the girl. The reality of what he had just done, physically striking a passenger, started to crash through his adrenaline. But he couldn't stop now. He had to double down. You attacked a flight crew member," Sterling stammered, his voice shaking slightly but still loud. "I acted in self-defense. Tiffany, call the gate agents. Get the police. I want her off this plane, now. I'm pressing charges." Seraphine unbuckled her seatbelt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. She stood up. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'5", but in that moment, she seemed to tower over the seated passengers. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand, looking at the red smear. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't attack him back. She reached into her pocket. "He's got a weapon!" Tiffany shrieked, diving behind a beverage cart. Seraphine ignored her. She pulled out a sleek, black satellite phone, a specialized device used only by high-level government officials and ultra-high net worth individuals for secure, unjammable communication. "You're not making any calls." Sterling stepped forward to grab the phone, but this time, Seraphine stepped back with the grace of a boxer. "Touch me again," Seraphine said, her voice barely a whisper, but carrying a terrifying weight. "And you will spend the rest of your life in a federal supermax. I guarantee it." Something in her eyes, a cold, shark-like deadness, made Sterling hesitate. He froze. Seraphine dialed a single speed dial number. She put the phone to her ear, her eyes never leaving Sterling's face. "Harrington," she said into the phone. The cabin was so quiet everyone could hear the confused voice on the other end of the line. "Ms. Vance, is everything all right? We weren't expecting a check-in until you landed in London." "Change of plans, Davies," Seraphine said, her thumb wiping more blood from her lip. "I'm at JFK, Flight 404. I need you to ground this plane." "Ground it?" Davies Harrington, the CEO of Aurora Airways, the man who thought he was currently running the show, sounded panicked. "Why? Is there a mechanical failure?" "No," Seraphine said, her gaze drilling into Sterling's soul. "There is a personnel failure, a massive one. I want the Port Authority police at the gate. I want the entire board of directors on a conference line in 5 minutes. And Davies?" "Yes, Miss Vance." "Look up who is piloting Flight 404. Tell me his name." There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. Sterling watched, his face losing color. The name Harrington had struck a chord. He knew the CEO's name was Harrington. But who was this girl calling the CEO by his first name? "It's Captain Ricky Sterling," Harrington's voice came back, senior pilot. "Why?" "Captain Sterling just physically assaulted me in the cabin," Seraphine said calmly. "He slapped me across the face because he didn't believe I could afford my seat." "Oh my God," Harrington gasped. "Ms. Vance, I'm coming down there personally. I'm in the terminal. I'll be there in 3 minutes." "Bring legal," Seraphine said, "and bring security." She hung up the phone and slipped it back into her pocket. She looked at Sterling. He was pale, his mouth slightly open. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a dawn of horrific realization. Who are you?" Sterling whispered. Seraphine sat back down in seat 1A, rebuckled her seatbelt, and looked out the window at the rain. "I'm the woman who signs your paychecks, Captain," she said, without looking at him, or rather, the woman who used to. The 3 minutes that followed Seraphine's phone call were the longest of Captain Ricky Sterling's life. Time seemed to warp, stretching and distorting. The silence in the first-class cabin was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of luxury. It was the terrified silence of a room where a bomb had just been armed. Sterling stood near the cockpit door, his hands twitching by his sides. His mind was racing, desperately trying to construct a narrative that would save him. "She's lying," he told himself. "She knows the name of the CEO because she Googled it. She's a con artist, a high-level grifter." But the doubt gnawed at his gut. The way she spoke, the absolute lack of fear, was terrifying. Tiffany, the flight attendant who had instigated the conflict, was pale. She busied herself in the galley, needlessly rearranging champagne flutes, her hands trembling so hard the glass clinked together like wind chimes. She avoided eye contact with everyone, especially the young woman in seat 1A. Seraphine remained motionless. She held a napkin to her lip, checking it periodically. The bleeding had slowed, but her cheek was beginning to swell, a dark bruise forming against her skin. She stared out the rain-streaked window, watching the ground crew toss luggage onto the conveyor belt, completely detached from the tension inside the tube. Mr. Archibald, the hedge fund manager across the aisle, had stopped pretending to read his paper. He was texting furiously, likely alerting his broker or his lawyer. He kept glancing at Seraphine, his expression shifting from disdain to a calculating curiosity. Then the commotion began on the jet bridge. It started with the sound of heavy footsteps, running. Not the casual stroll of passengers boarding, but the urgent, thundering stride of men in a hurry. "Make a hole! Move aside!" a voice bellowed from outside the aircraft door. Captain Sterling straightened up, adjusting his epaulets. "Finally," he muttered to Tiffany, finding a shred of his lost confidence. "Security. Watch them drag her out." He turned to face the boarding door, putting on his best, aggrieved authority figure face. He prepared his opening line. "Officer, this passenger is violent and refuses to—" The door flew open. It wasn't the police. Not yet. First through the door was a man in a navy blue Italian suit that cost more than Sterling's car. He was sweating, his tie slightly askew, his chest heaving from sprinting through Terminal 4. It was Davies Harrington, the CEO of Aurora Airways. Behind him were two men in dark suits with earpieces, private corporate security, and behind them, 3 uniformed officers from the Port Authority Police Department. "Davies!" Sterling exclaimed, stepping forward with a relieved smile, extending his hand. "Thank God you're here. It's been absolute chaos. We have a situation with a passenger who claims—" Davies Harrington didn't even look at him. He barreled past the captain of the flagship Dreamliner as if he were a piece of furniture. Harrington went straight to seat 1A. The entire cabin watched in disbelief as the CEO of the airline dropped to one knee in the aisle, placing himself at eye level with the girl in the hoodie. "Miss Vance!" Harrington gasped, breathlessly. I am so incredibly sorry. Are you hurt?" Sterling's hand, still extended for a handshake, fell slowly to his side. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The world tilted on its axis. Seraphine turned slowly from the window. She looked at Harrington, then lowered the napkin to reveal the cut on her lip and the angry red welt on her cheekbone. Harrington flinched visibly. "Oh, good God, we need a medic! Get a medic in here now!" he shouted over his shoulder to his security team. "I'm fine, Davies," Seraphine said, her voice calm but raspy. "I don't need a medic. I need an explanation." "You'll have one," Harrington promised, his face pale. "We will get to the bottom of this immediately." "Davies," Sterling interrupted, his voice cracking. He stepped into the aisle, looming over his boss. "Davies, listen to me. You don't know what happened. This woman, she was belligerent. She refused to show a ticket. She assaulted me first. I was protecting the flight." Harrington stood up slowly. He was a shorter man than Sterling, but in that moment he possessed the weight of the entire corporate hierarchy. He turned to face the pilot, his eyes burning with a fury that made the flight attendants shrink against the bulkheads. "Captain Sterling," Harrington said, his voice deadly quiet. "Do you know who this is?" She's a squatter," Sterling stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Seraphine. "She's nobody." "This nobody," Harrington hissed, stepping into Sterling's personal space, "is Seraphine Vance. She is the founder of Vance Global." Sterling blinked. The name meant nothing to him. He was a pilot. He didn't read the financial news. So? She's a rich girl. That doesn't give her the right to. She didn't just buy a ticket, Ricky. Harrington cut him off, his voice rising. As of Tuesday morning, Vance Global acquired a 51% controlling interest in Aurora Airways. She isn't a passenger. She is the owner. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Owner. Sterling felt the blood drain from his face so fast, he grew dizzy. His knees felt weak. He looked at the girl in the hoodie, the girl he had backhanded, the girl he had sneered at. She wasn't just a customer. She was his boss's boss. She was the entity that owned the plane, the fuel, the uniform on his back, and the pension he was waiting to collect. "No," Sterling whispered, denial flooding his brain. "That's impossible. The deal was with a consortium." "She is the consortium," Harrington shouted. Seraphine stood up again. This time, when she stood, the dynamics were different. She wasn't a victim defending her seat. She was the judge, jury, and executioner. "Captain Sterling," Seraphine said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. "You struck me. You physically assaulted a passenger because you made a judgment call based on my race and my clothes. You decided I didn't belong in your world." I thought," Sterling stuttered, sweat pouring down his forehead. "It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I didn't know." "You didn't know I was powerful," Seraphine corrected him cold. "If I had been a student or a grandmother or just a regular woman who saved up for a nice seat, you would have gotten away with it. You would have dragged me off this plane and ruined my day. That is why I am here, to see how you treat the people you think have no power." She turned to the Port Authority officers who were waiting patiently by the door. "Officers," Seraphine said, "I would like to press charges for assault and battery." The sight of Captain Ricky Sterling, a man who had walked through airports like a god for 30 years, being handcuffed in the aisle of his own first-class cabin, was an image that would be burned into the minds of everyone present forever. "You can't do this!" Sterling shouted as the officers spun him around. The reality was setting in, and it was ugly. Panic replaced arrogance. "I have rights! I'm a senior captain! Call the union rep! Davies, don't let them do this!" Davies Harrington looked away, rubbing his temples. "You did this to yourself, Ricky. You hit a passenger. There isn't a union in the world that can protect you from that." "She provoked me!" Sterling screamed, struggling as the cuffs clicked shut, the metal bit into his wrists. "She's the aggressor. Tiffany, tell them she hit me first." All eyes turned to Tiffany. The lead flight attendant was pressed against the galley wall, looking like she wished she could dissolve into the paneling. She saw Sterling in cuffs. She saw the CEO glaring at her. She saw the cold, dead eyes of Seraphine Vance. Tiffany was a survivor, and survivors don't go down with the ship if they can help it. Tiffany's voice quavered. "I didn't see her hit you, Captain." Sterling's eyes bulged. "You liar! You screamed it. You yelled, 'She assaulted the captain!'" "I was mistaken," Tiffany said quickly, her eyes darting to Seraphine, pleading for mercy. "From my angle, it looked like a struggle. But now that I think about it, she was just blocking his hand. He hit her. Unprovoked." "You treacherous witch." Sterling lunged at her, but the police held him back. "Get him off my aircraft," Seraphine said, her tone bored. The police marched Sterling toward the door. As he passed Seraphine, he stopped struggling. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of hatred and terror. "I have a pension," he whispered hoarsely. 30 years. You can't take that." Seraphine looked him up and down. "You should have thought about your pension before you raised your hand to a woman. Read the morality clause in your contract, Ricky. Gross misconduct. 0 tolerance for violence. You won't see a dime." Sterling let out a sob, a broken, pathetic sound, before the officers shoved him forward and out onto the jet bridge. The cabin was silent again, but the tension had shifted. It was no longer the tension of conflict. It was the tension of fear. Everyone left in that cabin knew they were in the presence of a predator who had just taken down a lion. Seraphine turned her attention to the galley. Tiffany was trying to make herself look busy, rearranging the ice bucket again. "Tiffany, was it?" Seraphine asked. Tiffany jumped. "Yes, Miss Vance. Again, I am so sorry about the captain. He has a temper. We've all been afraid of him for years. I tried to de-escalate, but—" "Stop," Seraphine said. She raised her hand. "Don't insult my intelligence. You didn't try to de-escalate. You initiated. You profiled me the second I sat down. You called him. You lied and said I assaulted him to give him an excuse to get physical." I was just following protocol," Tiffany stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. Real tears this time. Tears of unemployment. "Your protocol is to assume a young black woman in a hoodie is a criminal?" Seraphine asked. "Pack your bag." "Miss Vance, please," Tiffany begged, clasping her hands. "I have a mortgage. I've been with Aurora for 10 years. "Then you should have learned some customer service in that decade," Seraphine said, turning to Harrington. "Davies, remove her from the flight roster. She's suspended pending an investigation, which I will oversee personally. I want her off the plane in 2 minutes." "Understood," Harrington said, nodding to the head of security. The security guard stepped forward and gently but firmly guided a sobbing Tiffany toward the door. The cabin was now devoid of crew. It was just the passengers, the CEO and Seraphine. Seraphine finally let out a long breath, her shoulders dropping slightly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull throb in her cheek. She looked around the cabin. Her eyes landed on Mr. Archibald, the man in the bespoke suit across the aisle. He was staring at her, his mouth slightly open. When their eyes met, he cleared his throat nervously and attempted a smile. "That was quite the display, Miss Vance," Archibald said, his voice oily. "Justice served, I suppose. Disgraceful behavior from that pilot. I was just about to intervene myself, you know." Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "Were you?" "Oh, absolutely," Archibald nodded vigorously, straightening his tie. "I saw the whole thing. If you need a witness statement for the police, I'd be happy to provide one. Us business leaders need to stick together, right?" He chuckled nervously. Seraphine walked over to his seat. She leaned down, resting her hands on the armrests of his pod, trapping him. "Mr. Archibald," she said, "I saw you when I walked in. You looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of your shoe. You laughed when the flight attendant tried to humiliate me. And when that man slapped me in the face, you went back to reading your newspaper." Archibald's smile faltered. "Now, wait a minute. I know who you are," Seraphine continued. "Archibald Holdings. You manage a significant portion of the Aurora Airways pension fund, don't you?" Archibald swallowed hard. We have a contract." "Not anymore," Seraphine said, standing up straight. "Davies?" "Yes, Miss Vance." Harrington was at her elbow instantly, holding a tablet. "Review the Archibald Holdings contract. Find the termination clause. I don't care what the penalty fee is. Pay it. We're moving the fund to a new manager." "Done," Harrington said, typing a note. "You can't do that," Archibald spluttered, his face turning purple. "That's a multi-million-dollar contract. You can't cancel it because of a personal vendetta." "I can," Seraphine said simply, "because it's my airline, and I don't do business with cowards." She turned back to Harrington. "I'm not flying to London today, Davies. My face is swelling up, and I have a statement to give to the police. Get everyone else on this flight to their destination. Give every passenger in this cabin a full refund and a $10,000 travel voucher for the trauma." "Of course," Harrington said. "And for you? Can I get you a car?" "Yes," Seraphine said. She grabbed her bag from the overhead bin, the cheap, battered duffel bag that had made them think she was nobody. She slung it over her shoulder. "Take me to the headquarters," she said. I want to call a full board meeting. If the pilot and the lead attendant are this rotten, I want to know what else is broken in this company. We're going to clean house." She walked toward the exit, stopping at the door where the rest of the flight crew, the economy attendants who had watched from behind the curtain, were huddled, looking terrified. Seraphine looked at a young flight attendant, a girl no older than 20, who looked like she was about to pass out from fear. "You," Seraphine said gently. Me? The girl squeaked. "You were the only one who gasped when he hit me," Seraphine said. "I heard you. You wanted to help, didn't you?" The girl nodded tearfully. "I was scared of the captain. He can fire us." "Not anymore," Seraphine said. "What's your name?" "Chloe," the girl whispered. "Chloe," Seraphine smiled, a genuine warm smile despite her swollen lip. "You're the new lead flight attendant for this flight. Take care of these passengers." As Seraphine walked up the jet bridge, leaving the stunned silence of Flight 404 behind her, she touched her cheek. It hurt. It would bruise black and blue. But as she pulled her phone out to check the stock price of her new acquisition, she knew one thing for sure. It was worth it. The Aurora Airways headquarters was a monolith of steel and glass overlooking the grey waters of the bay, a few miles from JFK. It was designed to intimidate. The lobby had ceilings 3 stories high, polished marble floors that clicked sharply under heels, and a security desk that looked more like a military checkpoint. Seraphine walked through the revolving doors. She still wore the grey hoodie, now stained with a few drops of dried blood. Her face had swollen significantly in the hour since the incident. Her left eye was partially shut, and the bruise on her cheek had turned a violent shade of purple-black. Davies Harrington, the CEO, trotted nervously a few steps behind her, looking like a man marching to his own execution. He was on his phone, barking orders to the PR team, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. Seraphine approached the front desk. The receptionist, a woman named Bella who had been guarding the gate of Aurora Airways for 20 years, looked up. She saw the hoodie. She saw the battered face. She saw the sneakers. "Deliveries are around back, honey," Bella said, without looking away from her computer screen. "And you need to clean yourself up. This is a corporate office." Seraphine stopped. She placed her hands flat on the high marble counter. "I'm not a delivery driver, Bella," Seraphine said softly. Bella looked up, annoyed. "Look, I don't know who you are, but you can't be in here loitering. Security!" "Bella!" Davies Harrington's voice boomed across the lobby as he caught up. He looked frantic. "Stand down! That is Miss Vance!" Bella's jaw dropped. She looked from the disheveled, injured girl to the CEO. "Ms. Vance? The new owner." "Yes," Seraphine said. "Access card, now. And a conference room, the main boardroom. I want every department head there in 10 minutes. Flight ops, HR, legal, finance, everyone." Bella scrambled, fumbling with a lanyard. Yes, ma'am. Right away. I'm so sorry, I didn't recognize." "Why would you?" Seraphine took the lanyard. "I don't look like the people you usually let in, do I?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked toward the elevators. The boardroom on the 40th floor was a sanctuary of silence and power. A long mahogany table, capable of seating 30 people, dominated the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the airport, where Flight 404 was currently sitting at the gate, pilotless and purged. Seraphine sat at the head of the table. She hadn't changed clothes. She wanted them to see it. She wanted the blood and the bruise to be the first thing they looked at. Slowly, the executives trickled in. Men in grey suits, women in pearls. They were the old guard. They chatted quietly, confused about the emergency summons. When they saw Seraphine, the chatter died instantly. They looked at her face with horror, then confusion, then uncomfortable realization. The last man to enter was Marcus Thorne, the director of flight operations. He was a large man, former military, with a reputation for being a pilot's pilot. He and Captain Sterling were old drinking buddies. Thorne looked annoyed to be there. "Davies!" Thorne boomed, ignoring Seraphine. "What is this about? I have a schedule. And I hear Sterling has been detained? What the hell is going on?" "Sit down, Marcus," Harrington said, quietly, taking a seat to Seraphine's right. Thorne looked at Seraphine. "And who is this? Did she get into a fight in the lobby? Why is she at the head of the table?" "This is Seraphine Vance," Harrington said. "She owns the company, Marcus." Thorne paused. He looked at the hoodie. He smirked. This is the private equity genius we heard about? You look like you just walked out of a bar fight, sweetheart." "I didn't walk out of a bar fight," Seraphine said, her voice cutting through the room like a razor. "I walked out of your first-class cabin." She pointed to her cheek. "Your chief pilot, Ricky Sterling, did this to me an hour ago because I refuse to give up the seat I paid for." The room gasped. Whispers erupted. Thorne's face hardened, but he didn't look shocked. He looked defensive. "Sterling?" Thorne scoffed. "Dick Sterling is a professional. If he used force, it was justified. You probably posed a security threat. He has discretion under the Patriot Act to—" "I was sitting down," Seraphine interrupted. "I was reading a menu. And when he realized he couldn't intimidate me, he backhanded me." "That's your word against his," Thorne said, crossing his arms. "I'm not going to let you crucify a 30-year veteran over a misunderstanding. The Union will eat us alive." Seraphine pulled a file folder out of her duffel bag. It wasn't a folder she had brought with her. It was one she had Harrington print out while they were in the elevator. "A misunderstanding," Seraphine repeated. She opened the file. "Is it a misunderstanding that in 2018, Sterling was reported for throwing hot coffee on a junior co-pilot who corrected his altitude?" Thorne shifted in his seat. That was resolved internally. Just boys letting off steam. "Is it a misunderstanding," Seraphine flipped a page, "that in 2021, 3 female flight attendants filed formal complaints about Sterling touching them inappropriately in the cockpit? Complaints that vanished from the official HR record but remained in the digital backup archive. The HR director, a nervous woman named Karen, went pale. And," Seraphine flipped another page, "is it a misunderstanding that last year Sterling called a ground crew member a racial slur over an open radio frequency? A recording that was deleted by— Let's see." Seraphine looked up, locking eyes with Thorne. "By you, Marcus." The room was dead silent. Thorne's arrogance evaporated. "You've been protecting him," Seraphine said. "You created a culture where a pilot thinks he is a god. You taught him that he is untouchable. You taught him that he can hit a woman in the face, and his buddy Marcus will make it go away. Now listen here." Thorne stood up, slamming his hand on the table. "You can't just come in here and—" "You're fired," Seraphine said. Thorne froze. "Excuse me?" "You're fired," she repeated, "for cause. Covering up workplace harassment, destruction of company records, and gross negligence. Security is waiting outside the door." "You can't fire me," Thorne shouted, his face turning purple. "I know where the bodies are buried. I run this airline." "Not anymore," Seraphine signaled to the door. 2 security guards entered. "Escort Mr. Thorne out. He is not to touch a computer. He is not to speak to staff. Walk him to the curb." As Thorne was dragged out, shouting obscenities, Seraphine turned back to the trembling executives. "Anyone else?" she asked softly. "Anyone else want to defend the old guard?" Silence. "Good," Seraphine said. "Now, let's talk about the video." The video Seraphine mentioned wasn't the security footage. It was something far more dangerous. While Seraphine was transit to the headquarters, a passenger in seat 2F, a teenage tech mogul named Leo, had uploaded a video to TikTok. He had filmed the entire interaction from the gap between the seats. The caption read, "POV, the pilot of Aurora Airways just slapped a passenger for being black in first class. WTF." By the time the board meeting started, the video had 500,000 views. By the time Marcus Thorne was thrown out of the building, it had 14 million. The internet was on fire. Boycott Aurora was the #1 trend globally on X, formerly Twitter. The stock price, which Seraphine had just spent billions to acquire, was in freefall. It had dropped 12% in 40 minutes. Seraphine sat in the CEO's office, an ice pack held to her face. Davies Harrington was pacing the floor. "It's a disaster," Harrington groaned. "The advertisers are pulling out. The travel agencies are cancelling contracts. We need to issue a statement. We need to distance ourselves." "We don't distance ourselves," Seraphine said, staring at the iPad showing the video loop. It was brutal to watch. The sound of the slap was loud. The look of shock on her own face was heartbreaking. "We own it." Miss Vance, the head of PR, a sharp woman named Eleanor, stepped in. "The standard protocol here is to suspend the pilot, announce an independent investigation, and stay quiet until the news cycle moves on. If we admit guilt too early, the liability lawsuits will be astronomical." "I don't care about the money," Seraphine said. "I care about the truth." Just then, a breaking news alert flashed on the TV screen, mounted on the wall. It was CNN. "Breaking news. Lawyers for Captain Ricky Sterling have issued a statement regarding the incident on Flight 404. Seraphine turned up the volume. A slick lawyer with a shiny suit was standing on the steps of the police precinct where Sterling was being held. "My client, Captain Sterling, is a decorated hero," the lawyer announced to the bank of microphones. "He was assaulted first. The passenger in question, a woman with no identification, lunged at him. She was a security threat. Captain Sterling used necessary force to protect the cockpit. We will be filing a countersuit against Aurora Airways for wrongful termination and defamation. This is a setup by the new woke ownership to purge senior staff." Davies Harrington threw his hands up. "See, he's spinning it. He's playing the victim. Now half the country will believe him." Seraphine stood up. The pain in her face was a throbbing drumbeat, but it clarified her thinking. "Elena," Seraphine said to the PR director, "book me an interview." "With who?" Elena asked. "A friendly outlet? A travel blog?" "No," Seraphine said. "The biggest one. Get me on prime time. Tonight. I'm going to tell the story myself." 6 hours later. The Wolf Blitzer Situation Room. Seraphine sat in the studio chair. They had offered to put makeup on her to cover the bruise. She had refused. The purple welt was hideous, swelling her eye shut, twisting her lip. It looked raw and painful under the harsh studio lights. The camera went live. "Tonight," Wolf Blitzer began, his voice grave. "The slap heard around the world. We are joined exclusively by the woman in the video. But she isn't just the victim. In a twist that has shocked Wall Street, she is the new owner of Aurora Airways." "Seraphine Vance." Wolf turned to her. "Ms. Vance, thank you for being here. That is a very nasty injury." "It feels worse than it looks, Wolf," Seraphine said. Her voice was calm, distinct, and powerful. "Captain Sterling's lawyers claim you attacked him," Wolf pressed. "They say you were an unruly passenger who refused to follow crew instructions. What is your response?" Seraphine looked directly into the camera lens. She imagined Sterling watching from his holding cell. She imagined Marcus Thorne watching from his living room. "Wolf, I am a billionaire," Seraphine began. "I could have bought that plane, not just the seat." But I didn't dress like a billionaire today. I dressed like a tired traveler. And because of that, because of the color of my skin and the hoodie on my back, Captain Sterling decided I didn't have the right to exist in his space. He claims self-defense, Wolf countered. I have released the full cabin audio to the press as of 5 minutes ago, Seraphine said. Wolf touched his earpiece. I'm hearing we have that audio now. Okay, let's play a clip. The audio played. The studio audience heard the sneering voice of Sterling. Grab your bag. Tiffany will find you a seat in the back where you fit in. They heard Seraphine's calm refusal. They heard the rustle of fabric as he grabbed her. And they heard the slap. It was undeniable. There was no assault by Seraphine, just a bully attacking a woman. When the clip ended, Seraphine continued. I am not here to just ruin one pilot, she said. I am here to say that Aurora Airways is under new management. Today, I fired the director of flight operations, who covered up abuse for years. Today, I fired the entire HR leadership team. We are starting over. And what about the lawsuit? Wolf asked. Sterling is suing you for millions. Seraphine smiled, and despite the bruise, it was a terrifying expression. Let him sue, she said. I have unlimited resources, Wolf. I will spend every penny I have to ensure that man never flies anything but a paper airplane again. And I am setting up a fund, the Seat 1A Fund. Anyone, any passenger on any airline who has been discriminated against, profiled or assaulted by crew, I will pay for your legal fees. We're going to change the industry. The interview ended. Seraphine walked off the set. Elena, the PR director, was waiting with a phone that was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Well? Seraphine asked, exhausted. How bad is it? Elena looked up, eyes wide. Bad? Miss Vance, the stock just rebounded. It's up 4% in after-hours trading, and the hashtag changed. To what? You stand with Seraphine. Elena showed her the screen. You're a hero. Seraphine didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired. She wanted to go home. She wanted to ice her face. But as she walked toward her car, a man stepped out of the shadows of the parking garage. He wore a trench coat and a hat pulled low. Security moved to intercept him, but Seraphine held up a hand. Wait, she said. The man stepped into the light. It was Mr. Archibald, the hedge fund manager from the flight, the man whose contract she had cancelled. What do you want, Archibald? Seraphine asked, motioning for her guards to stay close. Here to beg for your contract back? Archibald shook his head. He looked shaken. No. I saw the interview. I have a daughter. She's mixed race, about your age. He paused, swallowing hard. I didn't do anything on that plane, Archibald admitted, his voice thick with shame. I watched him hit you, and I did nothing. I wanted to say, I'm sorry, and I have something for you. He reached into his coat. The guards tensed, but he pulled out a small USB drive. What is this? Seraphine asked. Sterling wasn't just a bully, Archibald said. He was a smuggler. That's why he didn't want you in seat 1A. The panel behind that seat? It's loose. He uses it to move uncut diamonds from conflict zones into the US. I saw him fiddling with it before you boarded, but I didn't put it together until now. Seraphine took the drive. Why are you giving me this? Because you were right, Archibald said, turning to walk away. I was a coward. Maybe this makes up for it. Seraphine looked at the USB drive in her hand. The story wasn't over. The slap was just the beginning. Sterling wasn't just a bad pilot. He was a criminal, and she had just stumbled into the middle of a smuggling ring. The USB drive from Mr. Archibald was the final, devastating blow. Seraphine immediately handed it over to a private forensic team. Within hours, they uncovered encrypted ledgers, manifests, and coded communications that detailed Captain Ricky Sterling's involvement in a sophisticated, years-long smuggling operation. He wasn't just moving diamonds, he was trafficking exotic animal parts, rare artifacts, and even facilitating illegal currency transfers for organized crime syndicates. Seat 1A, the seat Seraphine had occupied, was indeed the key. The removable panel behind it was a clandestine compartment he had exploited for years, banking on the fact that no full-fare passenger would ever be scrutinized, and no junior crew would dare question him. The revelations shattered what little credibility Sterling had left. The district attorney's office, initially hesitant about the assault case due to Sterling's high-powered legal team, now had undeniable evidence of federal crimes. The charges against him escalated dramatically, from a misdemeanor assault to racketeering, smuggling, and conspiracy. His union protection evaporated overnight. He was denied bail, deemed a flight risk with international ties to criminal organizations. The media frenzy intensified. The narrative shifted from a simple story of racial profiling and workplace abuse to a sprawling tale of corporate corruption and international crime. Aurora Airways, under Seraphine's guidance, cooperated fully with federal investigators, turning over every internal document, every email, and every interview from Sterling's colleagues who had been too terrified to speak before. Marcus Thorne, the former director of flight operations, was also implicated. The USB drive showed his direct involvement in helping Sterling cover his tracks, providing false reports, and rerouting specific flights to facilitate the smuggling routes. Thorne, facing accessory charges and the loss of his own lucrative pension, crumbled quickly, turning state's evidence against Sterling and other complicit employees within the airline. He implicated 3 other senior pilots and 2 ground crew managers. The fallout was a cataclysm for Aurora Airways. Seraphine Vance initiated a brutal, uncompromising cleaning house. The entire HR department was disbanded and rebuilt from scratch. The corporate legal team, which had swept so many complaints under the rug, was dismissed. Over 200 employees, from ground staff to senior management, were either fired or forced into early retirement for their direct involvement, negligence, or complicity in fostering the toxic culture that allowed Sterling's reign of terror and criminality to flourish. Seraphine's initial plan to understand the customer experience had uncovered something far darker and more systemic. She didn't just fix the problem, she ripped it out by its roots. The lawsuit Captain Sterling filed for wrongful termination vanished as he faced decades in federal prison. His pension, his savings, his home, all were seized by the government under forfeiture laws related to his criminal enterprises. He, the man who had bragged about his untouchability, lost everything. The master of the vessel found himself master of nothing but a 6-by-9-foot prison cell. Tiffany, the lead flight attendant, was not so lucky either. While she avoided criminal charges, her career in aviation was over. The internal investigation, driven by Seraphine, unearthed a pattern of discriminatory behavior and complicity in covering up Sterling's lesser offenses. She was blacklisted from the industry, her once immaculate uniform and perfectly coiffed hair a distant memory as she struggled to find work. Mr. Archibald, surprisingly, found a path to redemption. Seraphine reinstated his company's contract, not out of charity, but because his act of courage, however delayed, had proven crucial. He became a vocal supporter of Seraphine's new corporate ethics initiatives, his shame giving way to a genuine desire for change. Seraphine Vance, however, emerged not just as an owner, but as a formidable force for change in corporate America. Her bruised face, broadcast globally, became a symbol. the Seat 1A fund grew exponentially, becoming a powerful legal arm for ordinary citizens facing discrimination. Other airlines, terrified of facing similar audits and public shaming, began to implement their own Seraphine protocols, mandatory diversity training, anonymous reporting systems, and zero-tolerance policies for harassment. Aurora Airways, under Seraphine's direct and ruthless overhaul, became a shining example of corporate turnaround. She installed new, diverse leadership, invested heavily in training and customer service, and revamped its entire fleet. The airline, once on the brink of collapse, saw its stock price not just recover, but soar to unprecedented heights. It became known as the People's Airline, a stark contrast to its arrogant past. Seraphine never forgot the slap. It was a physical reminder of the prejudice she faced, but also a constant motivation. The pilot, in his arrogance, had tried to put her in her place. He thought she was a nobody. He never knew that the girl he struck in first class was about to strike back, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. The slap had echoed across the world, shattering a corrupt empire and igniting a silent revolution. What a journey, right? From the chilling crack of a slap in first class to the unraveling of an entire criminal enterprise, Seraphine Vance's story isn't just about revenge. It's about the seismic power of one person standing up. Captain Ricky Sterling thought he was above the law, that his position and prejudice made him untouchable. He learned, in the hardest way possible, that true power often lies in the quiet, underestimated voices. This story shows us that karma has an address, and sometimes it arrives in a hoodie holding a multi-billion-dollar portfolio. If this tale of justice, corporate reckoning, and an unlikely hero resonated with you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that expose the truth. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a moment of profound storytelling.